This is the introductory lab to AutoCAD Civil 3D. Um, we're going to be taking a look at the graphical user interface today and then dealing with just some setting issues and point creation. And in later labs, we're going to be building on these concepts. So if you're used to or you have used Civil 3D User, you'll probably know a lot of this, but I still would like you to go through it. If you're a LAN desktop user, this will be a good migration. And if you're new to this will be very important information for you to take a look at. We're going to start looking at the graphical user interface, and it's understand that you're still in AutoCAD, but it's a bit different too because your menuing system is quite a bit different. So let's start at the top here, and of course you have this menu here. This is your application menu where you find most of your file handling information. And you have the quick access toolbar up here, which is also important. Right here you have your workspaces, and notice that your workspace is your Civil 3D workspace. You can navigate to just a normal AutoCAD if you go drafting and annotation settings or 3D modeling. You can get into more of a GIS kind of thing if you're dealing with planning and analysis. So we want to make sure that we are under the Civil 3D workspace. If you're a user of LAN Desktop, a longtime user, they had screen menus that were nice across the top. You can still have those, and I like to have those. What you can do is go to this down arrow here, and under here we can customize the quick access toolbar, but we can also find and show the menu bar. So what I'm going to do is do that, and notice it's brought out my menu bar. So again, these menus right here are just exactly what you would have found in your LAN desktop. So for instance, if you're doing points, you notice you've got a lot of your point menus, surfaces, line and curve labels, and labeling, and all of that. So that's all there. Um, we also have the ribbon, and the ribbon is quite a bit different in Civil 3D than it is just normal AutoCAD. Your ribbon is broken down into panels, and in each panel has groupings of commands that you're going to be dealing with. Um, the one thing is this area called the palettes. That's a pretty important one. And what you got is tabs. I guess I should mention that. So each tab will bring you a different section across your ribbon on your panels. If we start out with the Home tab, then you have the palettes here. This is a palette. This is your tool space palette. Very, very important. We'll come back and take a look at that here in a minute. But these buttons pretty much turn that on or off. So for instance, if you lose your tool space, notice that button grays out. To bring it back, you can just use that. We can also turn different tools within this. So for instance, the toolbox is on, which we probably won't be using, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. Now, a lot of the information or a lot of things that we're going to be dealing with this semester are going to be right in this Home tab. And you notice we've got create ground data, create design, which a lot of the stuff that we're going to be dealing with is right in here, also in this profile section. Then you have normal edits and modify commands, and then draw commands that you see here, and we're going to be working through some of these. Your layering command, and you can get to some of these other ones by going to, like, for instance, an annotate and say analysis. So we'll be looking at some of these as we go through this. So let's stay on the Home tab for now. This is your graphics area, of course, and this is where most of the action is happening. Over here, this is a nice toolbar. I would recommend you keep this out. This is your transparent commands, and what these allow you to do is work certain commands within commands, particularly things like handling points or handling things like profiles. So these are going to be important, and so you want to keep this toolbar out for sure. This is your view cube. View cube allows you to come around and look at different views. For most of what we're going to be doing, we want to make sure that this says top here, and it's important to make sure that that says top, but this is also the same place you can get it over here. So if you're not sure whether it's top over here, come over here and make sure that you got it that way. And a lot of times we'll be working in that 2D wireframe view. Um, Down below, you're going to have their status bar. Status bar has a lot of the current settings, and a lot of this deals with grids and on-off settings. You can customize that by going over here on 2016. So they got some nice things in here if you're interested in adding or deleting the look of that. What we want to focus on is a little bit more on the Civil 3D aspect, though. And what I want to do is come over here and look at this thing called the tool space. And the tool space has several very, very important areas. The first one is this thing called the Prospector tab. Prospector is really dealing with all of the object types that you're creating in Civil 3D. It's a way of organizing them, keeping them current, looking at what's active, and then interacting with them. And object types in Civil 3D are a lot different than just normal AutoCAD line, arcs, circles, those kind of things. So you're going to have things like point objects and surface type objects, alignment objects. So this is going to be a way that we're going to be working. And so the prospector is really, really important to the whole process. The settings govern the settings of those particular objects. So you notice that you'll have point settings, surface settings, and so we can get to those. Survey tabs dealing with survey control, and if you're dealing with generating stuff from a data collector, those kind of things. For our purposes, we're probably not going to be doing too much with that, so we could actually just come up here and turn that guy off, and that way we're just dealing with the prospector in the settings tab. Okay. You also have a lot of uh, right click and shortcut menu functionality, so your mouse will do certain things. Remember, a left click is a selection, your middle mouse is a zoom, and your right click is going to give you shortcut menus, and the shortcut menus are going to be very important to you as you work in Civil 3D. When we select objects, we're going to be getting into things and right clicking a lot. Also, don't forget the escape key. Escape key for you is going to be kind of a way of canceling any operation that you're in. Okay, so let's take a look first off at the settings. We're beginning a drawing and we're using what's called the Imperial template. Um, the template has certain settings, just like any AutoCAD template, but to AutoCAD Civil 3D, there's a lot of different settings. So what we're going to do is go to the Settings tab, and we're going to go up here to Drawing, and we're going to right-click Drawing. And notice there's a lot of different things here that pop up, but the one that's really important we want to grab or navigate to is the Edit Drawing Settings. And it should bring up this dialog box right here for us. And this dialog box has got a lot of activity to it, but it's broken down into tabs across the top. We have units and zones, transformation, object layers, abbreviations, and ambient settings. So notice there's a lot of things. If we go to, for instance, to units and zones, you're currently working in an imperial drawing, so your imperial drawing is set to feet, and angular units is degrees. And the one thing is, you don't want to use the units command in Civil 3D. You want to do it through this. It's a lot better way of handling it. This is important to understand too. Imperial to metric conversion, it's set to right now international foot. And if you're in a U.S. survey foot state, you got to be aware of what's going on there. So you might actually want to navigate to that point and break that down into a U.S. survey foot state, which Ohio definitely is. The scale factor, that just has to do with paper space and plotting. It will also impact how your text scales in and out. So it really doesn't mean that you're working at a 40 scale. You're working full scale in Civil 3D, just like you do in AutoCAD. But you're going to have settings that are going to affect your text size. So that's primarily text size setting and line type scale factor settings. And the other thing I should mention, when I say full scale in Civil 3D, full scale in Civil 3D means that you're actually drawing in inches. So 1 inch in Civil 3D or in AutoCAD, what we're working in is actually 1 foot to us. So when we put a unit of 20 in, it's actually going to draw at 20 inches, but to us it's going to be 20 feet. So just keep that in mind, because if you're sharing data with, say, an architect, they're probably working in architectural units and you're going to be out by a factor of 12. What we do want to do is go over to the ambient settings right now. And this is important to understand too, and this is a setup of the Imperial template, but what we have are different settings here for general, degree of curve, things like that, and that would be an important one. Let's look at that, see what your current setting is. You're in a arc length of 100 and unit chord length of 100, so these are dealing with degree of curve settings for highway. Got labeling, time, distance, those kind of things, but one that's really, really important and can get you in Civil 3D if you're not aware of it is this angle setting. And in the angle setting, what they have this set to is a unit of degree, which is great. Precision is 4, but their format is decimal. And what this does is it impacts the display, but it also impacts input. what you want to do is make sure that you put this to a degree minute second setting. So it was going to spit that out to you when it displays things as degree minute second, but when you input things, you're going to be inputting it as DMS. If you don't, it's going to be wrong by that difference between decimal and decimal degree and DMS. So when we enter a number, let's say 30 degrees, 30 minutes, we're going to enter it as 30.30 under this format, and then it'll go in as a degree DMS. If you don't do that, it's going to think that 30.30 is 30.30 decimal degrees, so it will be off quite a bit actually when you start using angles. So make sure that you change the setting again. So we want to either set that to DMS of that kind. You can do one of these three, it doesn't really matter. Okay, I usually just use that one. So we're going to apply that. Okay, that's extremely important. We're going to make sure that we do that every time. So every time you see me setting it up, I'll go into that and show you how to do that. One of the things that's very unique to Civil 3D also is styles. And everything in Civil 3D is style driven. Styles will govern how objects look. Styles will govern what layer they exist on, what color they exist at, what line type they're using. When it comes to labeling, it'll drive things like that, whether they're labeled or not, how they're labeled, all of that. Each type of object will have styles associated with it, and there's multiple styles. If you go to the settings tabs, you can see some of those. Actually, we're there already. But for instance, in the point, you can see there's point styles, label styles, point file formats. All of these things are just occurring with the point object itself. So we'll be changing a lot of those, and we'll also let Civil 3D kind of use its own. Any major Civil 3D user at some point needs to sit down and create styles. They need to create text styles. They need to create annotation styles. You can use what they have pre-canned in the software. Those are just kind of guidelines. So eventually what you're going to want to do is take the time as a user to sit down and create styles. And I guess if you would work for a company, what you would want to do is develop those styles that they can be shared. Create a prototype. Instead of using the Imperial prototype, you can create your own prototype. Make that your current working drawing. And then you'll be able to enforce those standards across your business model. So let's go ahead. We're going to get started. If you haven't downloaded your drawing file that we're going to be using, there's a drawing file I've got under our folder. And it's got some point information. What we're going to do is enter that point information, and we're going to do it several different ways. So let's get started. Okay, let's begin. We're going to take a look at this Pleasant Valley Road and US 127 site, and it has several control points. If you notice at the bottom, control points 1 through 6. It's implied that those points are in northing and easting. You really need to know that if you're working with someone, but most surveyors are used to the northing and easting concept, so that's what that represents. Also, once we get our control in, you notice we've got kind of like a little traverse 1 through 6, and we're going to be locating points off of that using a combination of angles and distances, different types of angles. So we'll be thinking about that. And we're going to just kind of introduce really and get you used to the point object today, and then we'll be building on that in the next lab as we get into more of the route location types of things that we're really majorly looking to do. So we have our drawing set up to begin. We're going to navigate to the Prospector tab. If you're still in the settings, make sure you're in Prospector. There. And we can look over here and we can see that we actually have nothing in here, and I can tell that because when I look over here, point groups, there's nothing over here to this side. When we actually create points, you're going to notice a little symbol that's going to occur right here, and it's going to tell us, hey, you actually have objects that exist for this. So nothing here. If I open up my alignments, no alignments. If I look at sites, there's no sites, no pipe networks, none of that. So right now it's basically just a clean drawing. So we're going to begin to create some points, and we're going to enter points 1 through 6. Those points again are in northing and easting format. And of course, we're assuming that we are under a foot unit international or U.S. survey feet. Excuse me. So what we're going to do, go up here to points, open that up, And there's different ways of creating points. You can create points manually by northing and easting, bearing, distance, azimuth, angle. So you've got different ways of creating points, and we're going to do what's called a northing and easting. This little guy is your points creation tool, and he'll pop up every time you create some kind of point. Right now it's prompting me to go into a northing and easting mode, but I want to create these points to look a certain way, so I'm going to go in and set up some of the styles on these things. So what we're going to do is take this little down arrow here and open it up, and notice these are the parameters that are governing how these points are going to look. Now there's default layers associated with your points. Open that up, you'll notice all of your points will drop on a layer called the vNode layer. Okay? If we look at points creation, what this is going to do is show us how we're going to uh, generate things. And um, one of the things that we want to look at, let's see, I don't think in here we're going to deal with this. So yeah, for elevations, we're going to not be dealing with elevations at all. So if you don't want to be prompted for an elevation every time you enter a point, instead of setting this to manual, we can turn this off. So we're going to open this guy up and we're going to set it to none. So that's just going to turn it off. Now what that does is just facilitates my input, but it allows me to, at a later date, come back and set elevations if I want to. Something that's interesting for Civil 3D, you don't have in other programs, you can give a point a name, and this is set to none, and notice that's good. Descriptions, again, if you're not using descriptions, you could turn them off, set them to none, or we could use them what's called automatic, which is cool because you can actually create a for instance, the word control, and it'll automatically come in for you. We're going to do it manually because we're going to want to be able to um, swap back and forth. Default elevation is 0. Don't worry about that. That's going to have no bearing on what we're doing right now. And the same thing with a description. We could put a description name in here and have it come in for us. So the only major change we did was just set this to elevations none. And so we're going to close that guy up. And the other thing I want to do is go down here. Well, let's look at styles a minute. I want to show you the current style that's going to drive these points is set to what's called a basic style. That's going to be how it's going to look. And in the label style here, it says point number elevation description, which we'll see won't show up, but we'll have to make that come on. So those are your styles. Notice they're grayed out, so you can't do anything with them. Then what we're going to do is look at the point identity. And there's a lot of things you can change in here, but the one thing I do like to do is use non-sequential numbering. So what that allows me to do is jump around. If I have sequential numbering on, it forces me into a 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of thing. If I turn it off, setting it to false, that'll allow me to use whatever number I want. So I definitely want to have that. Okay. So right now our cursor should still be asking us for a northing. So what we're going to do is go down there in the in your box, and you're going to type in your first northing. And once you get that, go ahead and hit enter. If you make a mistake, don't worry about it. We can come back to it later. Easting. It's going to prompt me for a point number, which I wanted it to, so I'm going to call that point 1. And then the last thing will be the description. And I'm going to lock my cap lock on. And I'm going to call this control. Okay, and I'm going to hit enter. And what it did is it's asking me for the next point. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and hit escape out of here, and escape again, and we're going to zoom out so we can see this point. So I'm going to go ahead and kill this right here, zoom out. You should see your point. Notice that's the way your point looks. It's driven by that style. You'll also notice right away that the point doesn't have any labeling associated with it. The labeling should be showing up, but it's not. So what we're going to do is make that show up here in a sec. Over here, I want you to notice under the prospector, you now see this symbol. This is telling you that you have point objects that exist in this drawing. You also notice this guy called point groups, and if we open this guy up, you have a point group now that has been created called all points. Now points are interesting because they exist in several levels in your drawing, and they can exist in point groups which are associated with either point numbers, range, so for instance point 1 through point 50 can be in a point group, or they can exist based on their name. You could have them by name, or you could have them by, say, their description. So our description for this guy is control. So we can have all of our control points in a control point group. But all points, no matter what they're named or described as or whatever, they always exist in the all points point group. So even if they exist in another group, they will exist in this group always. Okay, and I'm going to show you how we'll handle that too. Right now what we're going to do is do some edits. So we're going to go onto the all points point group, and we're going to go to this guy called properties. And under the properties, what we're going to do is look at the information tab if it's not always already set to that. And notice you can't change the name of this group because this group will always be there. So they've set this up in Civil 3D. You can't get rid of this thing. You can change the styles, however. Notice that the all point group has a basic style. And if we open this up, you notice there's a lot of different other ones, and they all have different symbols associated with them, essentially. You can also come over here and edit. And if we edit this, say, marker, notice the current marker is set to an X. If you want to change that to a plus, you can, or whatever, or you can actually grab a block symbol or create your own block symbols. So I'm going to go ahead and actually change this to a plus and apply that. And I've changed that basic style. Now notice also that the point label says none, and that's why you're not seeing any labeling. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this point number elevation description, apply it, and then hit OK. And you notice if you zoom out, you're going to see that actually there's just showing you a point number now and the description. And the reason is we don't have any elevation. So that's kind of that. So right now we have one point in a point group, and it exists in the all points point group. And we're going to also notice, you might see down here that it's showing up. This guy allows me to edit. Notice I can scroll this and it's allowing me to edit. And if I double click inside of that, I can actually change the elevation, or I can change the values in there. The other thing we can do, which is a little bit more convenient, is to open up the panorama. So if I go to this guy, right click, and I say edit points, this guy's called my panorama. And a lot of action is going to happen in the panorama, but this essentially does the same thing here as this does here. So I can come up here and I can look at things, and I can change things like point numbers. I can change, actually it looks like it's, yeah, point number, that, okay. So if you've made a mistake, let's go ahead first off, make sure that you've got your northing and your easting correct, okay. And that's going to be very important. If you don't have that right, fix it now. And when you fix it, it'll fix it on the screen. The other thing you might notice, and I don't usually work in easting northing, I like to work in northing easting, and they've got it set up easting northing. So all you got to do is grip the northing heading and just flip it over here, and now it should say northing easting. So your input display should look like that from now on. So if your panorama, if you made any changes to anything, you misspelled something or whatever, go ahead and fix it. And I'm going to go ahead and dismiss this. We're going to go ahead and enter the rest of the points. So take a few minutes to do that.